What is up, my ninjas? I'm STRYDENT, and you guys are probably wondering, what the hell is this? This here is the new mascot. It's me, finally. Now, this figure's made from Gorgo Aetherblade from Mythic Legions. I did a little bit of customization to get him to look a little bit closer to something resembling STRYDENT, and I feel like he's to a place where he can represent me properly. He can hold a sword. Working on getting some cooler blades though, but this is going to be the mascot for the channel going forward. But that does not mean that Akiba Red will not be showing up here and there. So just a little heads up on a quick change that you'll be seeing starting with this video, and probably going forward you'll see him all through next year and until I get tired of using them. Now, at first I had some elaborate passing of the torch type deal going on like you see with the Super Sentai shows, but I figured this would be good enough. Some of the stuff you see in the background is stuff that's going to be reviewed in the next coming reviews, but instead of only having Akiba Red, you're going to be seeing STRYDENT, and every now and then maybe Akiba Red will pop back in. But today we are taking a look at this guy, the Storm Collectibles M.Bison. Now, it took me a long time to do this review because there's so much that I want to say, and it's hard to say it and not have the, the usual suspects think that what you're saying is that the figure is trash, because a lot of people have just given this figure nothing but praise, and he looks cool, don't get me wrong. But, when you dig a little bit deeper than just the surface, which seems to be a problem YouTube has in general, you start seeing that things aren't all, as great as they seem. Now, the look of the figure is awesome, but we're going to dig deep into what's going on with this guy, outside and inside. Now, unlike many of my other reviews, we're going to do the sculpt and paint and mix in a lot of the comparison, because it's sculpt and paint that we're going to be comparing, and I figure instead of doing it as a separate section, it makes sense to put it all together. So here we go. So off the bat, before I even say anything else, the sculpt on this figure is immaculate. There are a lot of details all over the figure. The wash is pretty well done. It's a little excessive in areas, but it's pretty damn well done. His stature, his proportions, I mean, he just looks like the consummate badass that he's supposed to be. Now, that does not mean that he is completely perfect. His musculature is beautiful. They actually got the anatomy correct. It feels like Capcom anatomy, and I dig that. You know me. That's without Capcom, I would never have even started doing the type of art that I do. My style wouldn't look like it looks. A lot of attention to detail was paid in small parts, because we have to be realistic that Street Fighter figures or Street Fighter designs are not the most detailed designs out there. They have just enough that they don't get boring, but they're designed kind of with the aesthetics of 2D animation, because that's what they excelled at and that was what they were intended for. But you can see weathering on the metal parts, which in the game I don't even think they're that weathered. But, it adds a dimension of character to this figure. So, I got to give him props for that. There is also, the shading. Now, the detailing on his hat is kind of meh. And I'll get back to that in a second. You can see they got the Shadow Lu symbol on his belt. Pretty well done, or shock symbol. He's got the shiny boots with the brushed metal shin guards. They look good. They even detailed the soles of his shoes. So, props to Storm for that. And it's crazy because Storm kind of came out of nowhere, and the designs for these figures were like, holy shit, these look amazing. They really did what they were supposed to do, and I love it, But like when you compare him to the hand-drawn or hand-sculpted, hand-sculpted figures from Soda, for a 3D printed figure, essentially, this was all done from a 3D model. You look at Soda's details and how sharp they are, being that they were hand sculpted and then mass produced, you're lacking. I mean, like, look at the shin guards and the piece that sits on top of his boot. It's articulated to get out of the way when you move his feet. Little things like where the cape would sit, the little studs that sit up there. All that stuff is missing, and you have a bigger figure. On top of that, look at how awesome Bison looks, the Soda Bison looks with the Soda figures. And then look at this Bison. You'd think that, like, what, over 10 years of enhancements and upgrades in the process, and our figures would look better. But I don't think it looks that much better, and the scale is just weird. It seems that Storm is going to be its own scale, much like what do they call Play Arts Kai. Now, for some people, that might not be a problem, because as you can see, some people might want Bison to be as big as all the rest of the Shadow Law bosses. I think that Bison should be kind of like the mid ground, unless you're going for the story that it seems like they're getting rid of. The part of the canon that Street Fighter Alpha, well, the Alpha series in general, and Street Fighter 3 was capitalizing off of. Bison was in this situation where he was looking for people to potentially be his new host body. He tried with Cammy, that failed. He tried again with Seth, that failed. And in Street Fighter 3, he's done, because in the end of Alpha, you see him, explode. Essentially, the Satsui no Hadu, or the Shun Gokusatsu, killed him, and he blew up. But if we play with that canon, I guess, and you pretend that Bison did find a suitable host, or he found a way to keep his psycho power under control, because, the issue with psycho power is that your body has to be strong enough to contain all that power, which is why in the Street Fighter 2 series, Bison is kind of lanky and skinny in comparison, and then in Alpha he's like huge and swole. It's because he's overflowing with all this energy, and he's losing it in Street Fighter 2. This is the fucked up thing with their canon too, because some of the way the story works, plot elements jump back and forth from different times. But if you were to pretend that, say in 2 he's getting old, he's dying, and he's looking for a host, and then you fill in those gaps with Alpha 3, which is supposed to take place during what Street Fighter 2 was, then you could say, maybe he found it. And then you get to 4 and 5, you have this. But, I don't know. It doesn't matter when you have the figure in hand. In hand, you just have a representation, a three-dimensional representation of the character. And in my opinion, they hit the marks. Don't get me wrong. He looks just like he does in the game and everything. But I think that this design is just too big. And unless you decide to get only Storm Collectibles figures, and then maybe, and that's if they even produce all of the characters from Street Fighter, then maybe you will have kind of the perfect Bison. But from what I see, they're kind of all, relatively, in the buff area. But anyway, when you compare him to figures like my homeboy Ryu from the Soda Street Fighter series, which for a long time was the standard, you start running into problems. When you compare this Ryu to the Soda Ryu, and I know they're in the same line, they were sculpted by the same guy who was going by the scale that was given to us, it worked. But literally, as soon as you move from this Ryu to like the Figure Arts Ryu, you kind of see a slight difference, right? Detail-wise, you have a difference, but height-wise, you don't. You know what I mean? Not a huge one, which means they were paying attention. This is why I'm being kind of hard on the Storm figure. It's because, when you have a line that did so much, like Soda, you should be paying attention to the stuff that came before, because they did it right. So you see that Sagat and Bison are roughly the same height. Sagat's a little bit taller, but it shouldn't be like that. But, Bison gets this big-ass upgrade, I guess. But in my opinion, he shouldn't be that big. It takes away from the other guys. You know what I mean? When you compare them. So honestly, he would stay outside of the Soda display just because. And I hate this because I'm not that OCD. But with Street Fighter, scale is a big thing because the characters were designed that way. So to me, it takes away, I'm sorry, from, you know, the overall end result of these figures, you know, on your shelf. Now, articulation-wise, the articulation is pretty dope. Essentially, whatever I can do with the Soda figure, I can do with the Storm Collectibles figure. The problem comes in the amount of tweaks and things you have to do to achieve it. Now, I'm doing things that are actually signature moves that Bison has had during, you know, his life in the Street Fighter games all across all the different, you know, versions. A lot of his best moves, in my opinion, come from EX and SNK versus Capcom, because Bison was just on point in that. But anyway, you see him compared to Chun-Li, and he looks right. It's weird, you know, when you see him in comparison to certain characters, he's just completely on point. But then when you see him standing next to other characters, it's like, what the fuck? But as you can see, like, posing him, it doesn't seem to be an issue. It's when you start, you know, you leave him in a pose compared to other people, and you look at the scale, that's the biggest issue. But posing him, he's pretty fluid. It's pretty easy to get him to do what I want him to do, which is fun. But just in this small portion of me having him do stuff, doing kicks and, you know, having him stay in that pose, we ran into some issues, which is my glaring issue with this figure, that even though some people pointed it out, they did not do a good enough job expressing to you how bad this is. And this is what brings me to my problems, issues, and nitpicks for this figure. So his joints, especially, they're up in his arms because the gimmick has to do with switching out the arms to get this nice gimmick. And I did get the exclusive version that has this gimmick. The shoulder assembly is shit, which is what makes me run back to my Soda Street Fighter Bison. It's just like on a build quality level, this is a superior figure. And the fact that people either just didn't know about this or just missed out on this figure back when he was new, it frustrates me that few people actually are pointing this out. But this assembly is shit. While he was staying in that pose, the arm just fell out. Excuse me. The arm fell out. Now, I've pointed out before about tricks you can do to get the arm to stay in, but I was embarrassed. I was like, are you serious? I got him for a deal, so I don't feel too bad. But the assembly itself allows for some really stupid issues, you know? For a figure that is from $50 to $100, we shouldn't be going through this. Now, this is the assembly underneath the rubber, you know, nylon-ish body. And as you can see, areas have been chopped out of the clamp area where you insert the shoulder ball socket joint, or the socket, I guess is what I was trying to say. Good Lord, my brain. I tried to build up on one side just so that you could see it, and it worked a little. But as you can see here, there's an area right up there on the right side. It was chopped out. It's like that on both sides. Different people spoke to folks at Storm Collectibles, and they said they did this shit on purpose to allow for ease of removal. Now, this is the side that I built up with, the super glue trick. Now, no matter what people are saying, you should have an easier time once you build up the joint with some kind of adhesive, be it polish or super glue, and I didn't.
So, even when you do the build-up method on this peg, and then, push that into the holder, there's not enough room. So all you do to get it out is you turn this just a little bit, and it starts coming out, which sucks. Now, it's better on this side than it is on this side. On this side, all I have to do is move his arm forward, and it just comes right out. You see that? This is the part that no one really talked about. I mean, I heard Anthony's Customs mention that there were cracks in the assembly, but no one mentioned how shitty this makes posing the figure, all for a cross arm gimmick. Because that's the reason why this works the way it does. They could have made it tight, and then you could remove it, and just switch it out yourself, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. It would take a lot of time to get this joint assembly to actually break on you. So over the years, I've talked a lot about engineering on a figure and how, you know, certain figures need to be engineered better. This figure, he can you can pull the arms out, but it takes a considerable amount of effort, and they don't just flop out. This whole figure is modular. It's part of what made me think about using him as my mascot, is because he does do something a little bit unique in the realm of action figures, is that he's a well-painted, you know, highly detailed, pretty articulated figure, but he's modular. So if you have any others, which I do, I have one other figure, if I wanted to swap out parts, I could do so and get a different look. You know, I can pull his torso off, I can pull his arms off, I can pull the head and neck off, much like this. This figure is not articulated and not engineered in a way that is worth, you know, $70, $80. You know what I mean? Number one, the top portion of the body is rubber. This is going to break down over time. You don't hear people talking about that very much, but it is an eventuality of this kind of figure. Certain types of nylon and certain types of plastic and vinyl, they take a longer time to break down, but I have figures with this same kind of rubbery, plasticky, it's a vinyl-y plastic type material, and they start to crack over time, you know? Another thing, and this is on an engineering level, these peg areas are not long enough. You see that they put these covers for the butterfly joint to go in here and cover up all that space, right? So then it looks like it's some kind of functioning butterfly joint, when in reality, it is not. It's one ball socket joint. It's not a butterfly joint. That's a problem. That's pulling the wool over your eyes. A butterfly joint doesn't work like that. By now, all of you should know this. Another example of an issue I have with this same engineering, and I talked about this when I did the One Punch Man review, is Piccolo has cross arms, but his engineering is still exactly the same as all the Dragon Ball figure arts, and most figure arts in general, that have a bicep swivel. You just pop the arms off at the bicep swivel. Why couldn't they do something similar? It's not like they're not making this figure after this and One Punch Man and others, you know, Vegeta. You know, they're not doing that after those figures. It's not like they're not doing that after those figures have existed. Also, when you talk about just engineering and build quality, I keep hearing people say, oh, it's so much quality because he comes with a lot of shit. But we've seen this with Hasbro and their Marvel Legends, and where you get a mediocre figure that comes with a ton of accessories. Yes, the paint job is beautiful. Yes, he looks awesome. Amazing when you get him with his arms folded. But if that's the only gimmick and you completely sacrifice all this build quality just to do the fucking cross arms, I mean, yeah. You know, and then like Ryu didn't come with cross arms, and that's Ryu's victory pose. Bison comes with cross arms. They fuck up the figure, and then now collectors will have to go and find the version that does not have cross arms, because chances are the joint assembly is not cracked intentionally to allow for this gimmick. I think it's bullshit, and it's the one thing that takes this figure down from what would have been. Well, it's not the one thing, but that and the overall engineering. I mean, no one talks about how if you move his body around for a while and you try to make him do kicks and stuff, pay attention to what this is doing, because this is its own piece, right? The crotch, the floating crotch piece, if you do anything, like when I made him do the kick, when I shift his legs, the crotch piece is just a bar, and man, I'll just show you. There's no need beating around the bush. Come on, come off. All right. So, in order to switch this out, because you have another one, you have to take the torso off the crotch. When you take it off, you realize this is just a floating piece. This is all you got. Are you telling me that's $80 worth of figure? I mean, look at that. It's just a post and a dumbbell. That's all you got. I know that looks really bad, but anyway, that's all you got. So this moves around. Now you've seen on NECA, and these figures cost what? A fourth of what these figures cost. On NECA figures, same level of paint, same level of detail, if not more, but this floating piece is tight and it's fastened in a way that it doesn't shift around when you try to make him do stuff. If I put his legs up, it's just soft, so it moves out of the way and it looks like fabric, you know. It keeps in line with the overall engineering of the figure and the paint job and the aesthetic. In the back, the same deal. You move his leg back a little bit, the butt flap moves back, and it looks like it's still part of his pants. Doesn't get out of the way, it doesn't do anything crazy, right? I mean, it gets out of the way, but it doesn't go nuts like this thing. This thing, you throw a kick, it moves, the barbell is now exposed. You see that? No one made these observations. Good Lord, I'm tired. So this is the first day off I've had in a couple weeks. No, actually, it's been a couple months now. So, you know, forgive me for the brain fog, but my points are equally valid. Just for these two things, right? You have these two things flopping around and whatnot. This should allow for a lot of posability, and it does to some degree. I was able to pull off those kicks, but I had to fold this. Over time, this is going to rip. But I don't plan on playing with this figure. I still feel like the more I look at these figures, they're not made for people that play and pose often. They're made for someone who wants to pay for a very expensive looking figure that's going to sit on the shelf. I'm going to put them back together so you guys can see what I'm talking about when I talk about how the cross arms detail, it looks beautiful. He looks amazing. It almost looks like it's worth the $60 to $80 price tag. But in my opinion, now that I own him and I'm seeing, you know, how this all works, I'm just not really that cool with this. I feel like I've been taken for a ride somewhat, and that it shouldn't be like that, you know? I mean, I get it. People are going to say what they're going to say. People are going to argue because he looks amazing. But, I mean, the truth of the matter is the figure should do a lot more than he does, you know? The figure should be a lot sturdier than he actually is, and he's just not sturdy. And the fact that so many people want to argue this point, and they want to fight, and they want to complain, and they want to, you know, diss other things, because I before I bought this figure, I spent a long time looking at, you know, collector reviews, because I wanted to see what the consensus was amongst the fans. I don't really care so much about some of the other collectors, because some collectors collect with strange things in mind. And when I say strange things, I mean like some collectors want to keep the figure in the box, so you're never going to know what that figure does anyway, so your opinion is invalid, you know? To me, that may matter to some of you, but it doesn't matter to me, because I want to know what this thing does. Another thing was, I wanted to know what the, you know, just what problems were people running into with this figure, if any? Because he looked so cool that I was like, it's got to be a dope figure. He's just got to be. Then I get one, and I got a deal. Don't get me wrong, because I wouldn't have got him if I didn't find a good deal. But I get one for a really good deal, and all the problems ensue. I mean, putting him even back together after you do this and you pull apart all the parts, it's a pain in the ass, you know? See, like getting him suspended like that, he looks so cool. I mean, there's no doubt about it that the pose looks amazing, you know? And it's such an iconic pose for him that I get it. But like, wouldn't you rather get a statue that did this if you're gonna have to sacrifice all of the quality, all of the engineering that you would get from a well-done action figure? I mean, honestly, if that's... I'm not trying to buy statues. That's not my thing. My thing is action figures. So having an action figure that falls apart, if I do anything else with him besides this, is unacceptable to me. And for the price, there's no fucking way I'm paying 80 bucks, you know, 90 bucks, 100 and something bucks for a figure that fucking falls apart when I do the basics. That's just unacceptable. And the fact that so many people have reviewed this figure, so many, and they all say, he's amazing, he's great, look at the sculpt, look at the paint, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, look at this. All I have to do, and that's how easily this guy falls apart. That's not cool. And I even did the you know, build-up trick. So one of the joints, I think it's this side. Is it? No, it's this side. Is built up so that the pegs will, you know, kind of sink in a little bit, you know, deeper. They'll take up more space. There'll be more friction. And he still comes apart easily. That's unacceptable, you know? And I really was looking forward to this figure being the freaking bomb. And the fact that it's not, it frustrates me. So, you know, I'm glad that I still have my Soda Bison, even though he's the alpha version and he's so freaking buff and he's got the more anime proportions. At least I don't have any problems with anything falling with, you know, simple issues like the arms popping off really easily, like the hands just popping off really easily because they're rubber. They're not hard plastic like every other figure I own. It's good in the sense that if you really want to quickly put something in their hands or something, you know, like he has effect pieces that you can put in his hands, and I'm doing that right now while I'm talking to you because I was having fun. But then I started to get fed up with the fact that this is the issue that we're facing with this figure. So it's easy to pull the hands off and then put the effect in his hand because it's rubber. And then, you know, you can let the light play off of it. But long term, everything is already slack. So if you do decide to like pop things off of him and then switch him up, you got to think like you better leave it like that for a long period of time because it's not going to last. You know, down the road, you're going to be having issues because look at that. Look how easily I pulled that off, you know? And I know some people are like, I don't want to struggle, but at least once you fasten it on, you know it's on. With other figures, with this, you just pop it on and it's there and it holds in. Nothing secures, I guess is my issue. Nothing secures, and for the price, he should be 100% fucking secure. It shouldn't be a question of, did I do it right? You know what I mean? Why is he, you know, why are these things not holding on properly? When I do things with this guy, they pop in and I can't pull him out. You know what I mean? I can't pull him off. If I do that with him, his head's coming off. Look. That's it. And then watch, when I put it back on, all you do, just bloop. It wasn't even there, right? Bloop, on the peg. That's gonna come off after a few years of switching that. It's just gonna come off and then you're gonna be screwed. His head's not gonna have any resistance. The peg will have no resistance and then it will fall off. With this guy, like I told you, he's modular. When I pull this head off, it took me a while to pull all the parts off. The wrists, the elbow joints, the knees, the feet. And I did it for the review so you guys could see it. Everything popped into place so well that I had no issues. So it's important that, you know, if you want a figure that's just going to stand there, like what he's doing right now, you put him in a cool pose and that's it, then he's good. You know, if you want a figure that's going to stand the test of time, you probably want to go with the Soda version. The Soda version also scales well with every other release, you know, of the Street Fighter figures. I mean, this Storm Collectibles Street Fighter line feels more like if you're starting fresh and you want to have a Street Fighter line, you get them. But I mean, look at that. The Soda line, they all look right. They look like the sizes that they were in the game. Whereas this guy, I mean, even though they're buff in the game, this guy's ginormous compared to the rest of them. And it shouldn't be like that. So accessory-wise, this guy comes with a ton of shit. I mean, it's kind of what has kind of smokescreened a lot of people into believing that the figure is way better than he actually is. And I mean, in some ways it's a bad thing. In some ways it's a good thing. Overall, though, he has
pieces that are kind of standard if you think about it. You know, you have your effects pieces and you have multiple hands, and then you have a couple expressions. It's kind of the way it's being done these days. Um, this version is the exclusive version with the cross arms, which I talked about at length in the previous section. And you know, it's kind of cool. It's a cool gimmick if it worked the right way. The effects parts, they're nice too. One of the effects parts is kind of meh, and I'll go into the details about that. But all in all, he's got a nice amount of accessories. So let's run through it. We've got 3 effect parts. We've got what? 4 sets of hands, the cross arms, 2 expressions, an extra lower portion of his jacket, and lastly we have the stand. That stand is not the greatest, but of course we have the figure. The figure is a beautiful looking figure with a wonderful sculpt. I really dig the effect parts though. The colors on them are really nice. Now the first effects we're going to go over are the flame effects in his hands from his victory in the game. These look really nice. The color is just beautiful, and as you can see, there are little divots that his fingers actually fit into to allow for him to hold it. I tried to get really close up so you could see those. They work well, especially with the right hands, and I'm going to go into more about that in a sec. You have expressions. The big smiling, laughing expression is one. The regular smile is another, which isn't as exaggerated as it usually is. And then there's the mad standard face, which is the one I typically have on him. Now, all the different faces are essentially different heads. You swap the hat out with the different heads, or you use the head with the swapped out faces. You can unpeg his head, take off the hat first, of course, like I just showed. Put the hat on the head with the appropriate face, choose from your faces, and you are right to go. Unfortunately, you can't just, show him without the hat, or you can't have him like take the hat off and smooth his hair back. It just won't work, which kind of sucks. I was looking forward to doing that. He has some glowing, translucent hands for, I guess, the Psycho Crusher, or for some of his counters, or just to show that the psycho power is running through his body. I dig these parts. They look really good, especially when you have him in action, which you'll see later on. I mean, you might have already seen, but I think you'll see later on. He has, of course, the standard fists, which are the perfect size for his body, and you have open, splayed hands or fingers or whatever, and those work well too. The reason, though, for these is these work with the effect part, the swoosh effect part, which I kind of think is meh. It doesn't really do what I was expecting it to do, but it is beautiful. Supposedly the way you use it is you kind of cram the hands up in that cavity, and they're supposed to fit with just friction, and I'm not a fan of that, but as you use it, it's just kind of like
This piece is strange to me because it doesn't really fasten where it's supposed to be. And like you could, if you're clever, you can figure out ways to get it to work, but it always just kind of sits on his arm. So like if you wanted him to do that like clobber, you see how it's starting to fall off? That's all it does. It's just kind of sitting there. I would have preferred if there was a hand that maybe was like this hand right here, the transparent one, or translucent, translucent one, that fit in here, and it's like maybe they were sculpted together so that you could easily put it on here, and maybe this scoop was more, it was a deeper scoop and this was straighter so they could easily fit on, because when you do try to fit this on this hand, it's very hard because the curve is not deep enough. You see this? It's not deep enough to easily put his hands on there and get it straight. And I get what they're trying to do, but like if you follow the motion, maybe if it's an uppercut, it works really well. But if you do anything else, like in the game, he does I know in SNK versus Capcom he had it, and I think he still has it in Street Fighter V, where whacks downward and clobbers a projectile. It's more like that, you know, like he's walking towards you, and he used to chop down, I think, like break it. But I think in Street Fighter V, it's more of a clobber. You can kind of get it there, and it looks all right, you know. But you do have to do some finagling, and that's not necessarily the most fun. Now, with these extra hands, these hands here are the ones that you use with the flame parts. Now, try not to confuse them, because even though they look similar, one set of hands will not grip the flame parts. The almost all fingers curled will not hold the flame parts, but the ones that have two fingers a little bit, you know, stretched out more than the other two, that one will hold the flame effects with no problem. So not these, but the previous ones. Now the lower portion of his jacket, you have a standing kind of draped down version, which is this, and then you have the action version, which is kind of splayed out. And that's the one I typically have on the figure, just so I don't have to go through the process of separating his torso and whatnot, just so I can get him to use that part. I mean, it's pretty, but it's a lot of extra work. Alright, let's talk about this. This stand is kind of crappy, at least my version. As you can see, I have some putty right here so that I can hold the top of the stand in place. For whatever reason, it doesn't catch, and the thing is, it's clipped all the way to the back. It's not like traditional stands where you just have joints that you tighten and they stay where you want based on friction. Instead, it's like there are detents created by these little circular holes that you see here, and then there is like a nub that fits directly in each hole as you click down, and you can hear it as you move it around. Let me get the putty off so that you guys can hear it. And it's supposed to catch, but mine, the little peg thing is either broken or worn down, so it doesn't click. So it's not fun posing this guy. This is not fun at all, because it doesn't sit where it's supposed to sit unless I help it. So I don't know about all these people saying this stand is such a great thing. Also, I mean, it's only vertical, so like if I want him to be, you know, doing a Psycho Crusher, yes, this piece moves and this works fine. Yes, it's spring loaded, that's cool, but what good is it if I can't control the arm? This is why I say a lot of these reviews, they're bogus, because it's as if people are only reviewing the thing based on posing it, you know what I'm saying, and leaving it somewhere and never using it. Whereas people like me who actually play, we know stands like this, stands like the Obitsu ones, which are a little bit cheaper as far as you know, cheaper in what's the word, construction. We know that we can actually put those somewhere and not worry about, you know, the pose being broken. You know what I'm saying? We can actually like pose them in a way that we want, and the stand actually conforms to the pose that we want to put them in, you know? If I want him flying in a Psycho Crusher pose, I want the stand up like this, and I want to put the, you know, the clamp here, and then have him leaning on it. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like this, as opposed to, you know, as opposed to everything having to do with having a stem or an arm that shoots upward, a spine that shoots upward, and everything, you know, underneath the highest point, which I have to back up so you can see that. I mean, that's how high I have to put him in order to put him, you know, completely, you know, vertical, to have him flying on there, you know? So it's not the greatest at all. I don't know what people are talking about. It does have the Street Fighter V logo on there, and that print looks really nice, but that's it. It's a very impractical stand. I'm not a fan of it. I don't know what people are talking about. I think it's just the fact that it's a new company. They're taken by the fact that we have this, you know, it's new, and they're ignoring the functionality of what this should do. So Yeah, I don't recommend the stand unless you want to have him floating in the classic, you know, the reason why you even have this, you know, those cross arms and all that stuff. The reason why this figure exists, because I think that's the only reason why they made this figure, was because that pose was achievable. You know what I mean? With the cross arms. So this is the only thing that it seems to do well. The only reason to even use this stand is you can put Bison floating like this. And it looks good. So we're going to go through, and instead of doing a traditional articulation, you're just going to see it from the type of poses that I've got him in. Once you get past those issues that I pointed out, he really is easy to pose. It's just that there's not as much figure as we have with other, you know, lines. It's almost as if they kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like they kind of just didn't go all the way. I mean, you see the figure arts have substantial sculpting, substantial parts, you know, so that the articulation works. And when I say parts, I mean like everything's segmented, you know, and everything was sculpted to begin with, and then you chop it up to get the articulation. In this case, it's segmented, but things like the crotch, there's no real crotch. It's a faux crotch, you know what I'm saying? Which is frustrating. It should be a full-on, real deal crotch. It's kind of difficult to say whether or not the figure is just complete crap in the articulation area. I mean, he's almost all ball joints, which, you know, ball socket joints are pretty good for the type of range of motion that you need for fighting game characters. So, you know, in that respect, if you can get past the arms falling off as you extend things, you can pull off some really cool stuff. I mean, you see what I'm doing here. So, you know, it's one of those things. It's check and balance. If you're getting him so that you can pose him and put him up on a shelf, then you're going to waste and look past his limitations, and you just want that pose. You know, you want the cross arms. If you want a posable figure, he's very posable. You just got to deal with the low build quality when you do this stuff. Because believe you me, during this fight scene, arms fell off. You know what I'm saying? And it's mostly in the arms. I'm sure there are other things that Storm Collectibles will do, like Ryu and Ken and, you know, Chun-Li and Zangief, that don't have the issues that this figure has. So I figured, you know, a fight scene will help you decide, you know, if he looks capable or not. I don't know what else there is to say when it comes to that. I was able to get him in a lot of poses, but as you can see right there in the crotch, the dumbbell is shown. And that's something I wanted to point out. Just moving him around, the faux crotch starts folding up. You know what I'm saying? Under the hard plastic of the thighs and the legs and whatnot. And that's literally just me posing him for this fight scene. And I hadn't really done much before this, and I didn't plan on doing much with him afterwards. Then you look at Cammy, you don't have those issues, you know? So, you know, in action, if you're just trying to get a few good shots, he's going to be pretty cool. But compared to the build quality and engineering of other figures from other lines, I don't really think that he is up to snuff. So, you know, this is one of those things where the call will be up to you, but as far as I'm concerned, he's not up to snuff in comparison to other, you know, figures from other lines. So the articulation is meh with some caveats. And now for the bottom line, which you probably can tell where I'm going with this. There are a lot of figures out there that do a lot of the things that this figure is trying to do, and from a company that up until now no one's ever heard of, or few have heard of. They were making like sports related figures before, like Mike Tyson, several versions of Mike Tyson, some Bruce Lee statues, what is he called, a rigor mortis
12-inch action figure and a Hulk Hogan figure. Like they did okay stuff beforehand, but there were a lot of quality control issues back then. Now they move into Street Fighter, which is a line that has been, you know, done by other people and done well. You end up with beautiful looking figures that don't necessarily hold up in comparison to some of the other figures that are out there, especially Soda. The Soda Street Fighter figures, in my opinion, are still some of the best ones. SH Figure Arts is giving them a run for their money by updating some of those with a generalized version of each character that they choose to do, and they are changing the look just a little bit to make it a more generalized look. Meanwhile, Storm Collectibles is adhering more to the Street Fighter V and Street Fighter IV aesthetics, where you have more realistic proportions, you have kind of un-Street Fighter-y designs. You know, characters are huge instead of certain characters being huge. Almost everybody's huge, you know what I mean? Because it's an effort to kind of homogenize the Street Fighter aesthetic. So if that's your thing, then this is a no-brainer for you. You're going to get it anyway. You probably have already had Ryu, you got Ken, you got Zangief. You're going to pay the price for these figures. But for the price, all these things I pointed out, the jacked up shoulder joints, the rubber upper body, which I hear Storm does on everything. They did this on their Hollywood Hulk Hogan figure. It's just, I think, not the best, you know. The rubber nylon-y kind of material breaks down over time, so you got to think about that if you're going to buy this. Over time, are you willing to kind of sacrifice the longevity of the figure just so that you can have a rubber chest for no reason? You know what I mean? It doesn't really serve as big of a purpose as, you know, one might think. Are you willing to deal with the shoulder joints that are just easily, you know, easy to pop out, super easy to pop out, worse than the, or we'll say as bad as Mafex's Dark Knight figure, the 1.0. These are all things that shouldn't be an issue, you know. These are issues that could easily be fixed if they had followed some of the things Figure Arts and other companies did, where you pop the arms off at the bicep swivel instead of pulling the whole arm out of the socket and having the socket actually compromised in order to allow you to do that. That's just bogus. Also, fake butterfly joints that essentially are just filler pieces of rubber to make it look like there's a butterfly joint in there. There's a lot of things that were done on this figure that just don't work. The faux crotch piece. Usually you take a crotch, floating crotch piece, but you put it over top of an actual crotch assembly. You don't just have a barbell joint, you know, plus the, you know, the post that goes up into the body, and then call it, you know, a complete joint and just put a rubber piece floating right there. That's not good construction. So if you think all these things equal the 50, I know I said 60 to 80 before, but I got mine for 50 plus shipping, so it ended up being about 60. So from like 50 something to $60 to, you know, 80 or 100 bucks, because this guy goes for some crazy prices with the cross arms as if it's a benefit. It's actually a hindrance in my opinion. I would have rather they not do it and we just have joints that stick in place, you know, like stay in place. We don't have to worry about it. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. I've given you the pros and the cons. If you think this is worth it, you know, then get it. If you can deal with the things that, you know, are lacking. For me, this guy, I'm going to trade him or sell him or something. We'll see how it all works out. Maybe he'll just end up in the back of my Street Fighter display and never to be touched again, which kind of sucks because I like to play with my figures. But anyway, that's it for me. You know how we do. It's been my look at the Storm Collectibles Bison. Like I said, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And hopefully I will see you on the next video. Peace outside. If you enjoyed what you saw, please give it a like, a share, let your friends know. Check me out on social media. All the links are in the description. And if you really want to help me out big time, jump on Patreon and support the channel. Every little bit helps, the smallest amount to the largest amount. And last but not least, check out my comic, War of the Gods. Issue 2 is on sale now on Indie Planet, and the links are in the description. It's some superhero fun, and as a smaller independent book, it needs all the views, all the eyes on it as possible. So check it out, show it to your friends. Every view helps greatly. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks again.